Hello, everybody, and welcome to our 2023 Kickoff podcast. And what we're going to do today is to revise one of our original podcasts, which is talking about the packaging tax. I'm Ian Chisnall. I'm the product manager for sustainability, and with me here today is Joe, who's one of our technical specialists and an expert in all things relating to the packaging tax. We're doing this because there have been some revisions and there have been some updates, so we felt it appropriate to try and give you some more information about some of the implications of the packaging tax. So, Joe, could you please give us a brief summary of what the packaging tax is?
Yeah, so very briefly, the packaging tax is a £200 a tonne tax on any packaging that's made primarily of plastic. So that's by weight. If it's over 50% plastic, then it's counted under the plastic packaging tax. And it's good to say that it's not just packaging in general, it's per component. So not only it doesn't apply to a bottle as a full thing, but it applies to the bottle, the cap, and the film label, all as separate components.
Okay. So just to be clear, does this only relate to single-use packaging, or is this all packaging, no matter whether it can be used multiple times?
So it's all packaging, no matter, even if it can be used multiple times in industrial settings. If it then is used in a consumer setting, it applies to single-use packaging. So for consumers, things like bin bags and any single-use container would be covered by the packaging tax, plastic packaging tax.
So how can you achieve an exemption from the packaging tax?
Yeah. So there are a few exemptions, and the major one being the use of 30% recycled content. So the aim of this plastic packaging tax is to promote the use of recycled plastics. So if you're using 30% or above recycled content, then that then classes you as for an exemption. There are a few others. So if you are packaging licensed medicines, and that's only the primary packaging, then you're allowed to claim for exemption on that. And the other main one being if the packaging will be exported. So if the packaging is exported, you can claim back the tax.
Okay. So just for clarity, food packaging is still liable for the tax, even though recycled food contact material is difficult to source.
Yeah, that's unfortunately food packaging is still liable. It's also worth noting that the recycled content has to actually be in the product. So at the moment, you can't use things like mass balance. You can't use mass balance. So chemical recycling, which is a way of getting, food approved, recycled material isn't usable in the plastic packaging tax either. At the moment, there are.
Okay. So for the purposes of the tax, what constitutes packaging?
Yes, it's one of those. It seems like a very simple question that's actually a bit complicated because there are so many different rules and exemptions. But a packaging is anything used for the containment, protection, handling, presentation, and delivery of goods.
Okay.
Now, there are a fair few exemptions. So if the packaging is an integral part to the use of the good, so if you're thinking things like printer cartridges, or if it's used for long-term storage of the goods, so a toolbox, for example. There's also exemptions around display items, so for reusable displays for shops and that sort of thing. This is one area where the guidance being updated is very helpful because there is a big list on the Gov UK guidance, which we'll have a link to below or somewhere on our site. It does have a big list of this is exempt, this isn't. It's too much to go through now. It's worth a look.
So what we'll do with that is we will put a link to the government website, and you can do a little bit of research to find out what's liable and what's not. Okay, so you mentioned sort of at the start about if it contains 50% or more of plastic. So for multi-materials such as laminated board, how do you make the judgment?
So it's all done by weight. So if you've got laminated cardboard, for example, if the cardboard's over 50% of the product weight, then that's not classified as a packaging plastic component. However, if you've got something like a metallized plastic film, where the plastic is more than 50% of the weight, that will be classed as a plastic component.
Okay.
So
thinking about a product like a juice box, which is
Yep.
made out of laminate card, the cap, that would be treated separately as a packaging item that's made of plastic.
Yeah, so you've
Okay.
got the laminated card, so you wouldn't pay on the body of the bottle or container, but you would have to pay for the cap.
Okay. So at what point is the charge payable? Because there's different stages in packaging in terms of manufacturing, for example, film or things like that.
Yeah, so the point that the tax becomes liable is what's known as the last substantial modification.
Okay.
So this is for the final change to the part, dimensions, thickness, weight, or appearance. Again, this is one where I'd highly suggest anyone looking at this goes and checks the relevant section of the guidance. It has been updated. Again, part of the issue is there's a few sort of exemptions. So, for example, printing is considered a substantial modification. However, blowing a preform for a bottle. So, if you have an injection molded preform,
Okay.
that's the last substantial modification. Whereas the blowing process of that bottle isn't, even though it is a change in product dimensions. Also, if the part is filled as part of the final modification, it goes to the previous modification. So one thing to watch out for is if you're supplying to form, fill and seal, even though they're making a substantial modification, if it's part of the filling process, you might be liable for the tax where you wouldn't otherwise be if they weren't filling, if that makes sense.
Okay, so there's more information available on the government website, and I think it's very important that is researched to make sure that you are not missing out on potential liabilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so the company, having decided that they are liable, what do they have to do?
So essentially the main thing you have to do is complete a quarterly tax sort of thing. It's a quarterly tax return. You have to declare the amount of plastic packaging that you've either produced or imported. And, you have to include your evidence for, so if you've produced 100 tons of packaging, 50 tons of that contained over 30% recycled, you have to provide sort of evidence to suggest. So say that 50% of that was contained recycled, so you can strike that off. Also, you might have to, so if you know that packaging is going to be exported, you can defer it for a year, and then you can come through and sort of provide evidence to say, well, here's the export documentation, essentially, to strike that from your tax.
So it's typically done through an audit trail that you document what you do and you provide evidence that we have done this, so this is not liable, we've done this, this is liable.
Yes. Yeah, so it's to make sure that you've got it and then claim it.
Okay, so thinking about the exemption again, I mean, the clear exemption and the driver behind the packaging tax is to encourage this 30% recycled content. What constitutes recycled material for the purposes of the tax?
Yep. So there are two sets of two definitions of recycled material. There's post-consumer recycled, which is nice and easy. It's material that's been through its designed application, been collected at the end. So something that, a bag you may have seen and then put in the recycled. Post-consumer counts. There's also pre-consumer, which would typically in industry be called post-consumer, post-industrial, sorry. And that's where there have been sort of updates. So pre-consumer is what we typically call post-industrial, but it specifically doesn't include regrind material. So clarifications have been made to say that if you're recycling in-house it's not enough to regrind. The material has to require a repelletization process. Otherwise, post-industrial material would be allowed if it's come from an outside source. So if you've bought from a recycler, it doesn't necessarily have to be repelletized.
Okay, so if it's your in-house waste,
yeah,
it's got to have gone through a process of repelletization, so an AREMA or a compounder line that will repelletize it in order for it to be eligible as recycled material.
Yes, yeah. Otherwise, it wouldn't count towards that 30% recycled.
Okay, I think, and again, there is more information available on the government website, so if you want any clarity. But if you have any specific questions related to the packaging tax, myself, Joe, and other members of the Plashibution team are available for you, and we would welcome any question, and we will do our best to give you an informed answer.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.